This video is going to be my third in the series of reviews of the Giant TCX Advanced Pro 1. This will probably be my final review since I just wrapped up a full season of cyclocross racing on this bike. So let me show you the bike and I'll give you my thoughts on it. This bike is a medium and I am 5'8.5" and this bike fits me very well. I'd say the medium would be for someone around 5'5" to 5'10". This geometry is what's considered more of the Belgian style cyclocross geometry as opposed to what's commonly referred to as the American style cyclocross bike. So the Belgian style has a little bit higher bottom bracket. It's going to have a top tube that's maybe a little bit shorter and a head angle that's a little bit steeper, as opposed to the American style with a lower bottom bracket, a little bit longer top tube and slacker angles. What the Belgian style does is it makes for a bike that's going to be a little bit snappier in the handling, allow for more pedal clearance when cornering, and allow for a bike that's going to accelerate quicker. The downside would be one that's not quite as stable in the turns and not quite as stable on the flats. So it's going to depend on what you're looking for. I personally like this style since I also now have a gravel grinder bike that's got the lower bottom bracket and everything and makes for a better bike for longer distance. But this bike, and let me just say that the carbon on this bike is made very well. Giant did an awesome job. Giant makes really good carbon bikes. I don't think a lot of people out there will argue that their road bikes and their cyclocross bikes are some of the best carbon made. And what I mean by that is this is a very comfortable carbon. Sometimes carbon can be built very, very stiff, which is great for sprinting, but it's also going to be a bike that's a little bit more harsh, and it's going to be a bike that's not going to be quite as comfortable at the end of a ride or a race. This bike is still very stiff. I got a lot of hole shots this year, and so this bike sprints really well. A lot of the power goes directly from the pedals into forward momentum, but it's also a bike that's comfortable. It's very smooth. And that's good for, you know, not just fatigue over a long race, but also, you know, without getting bumped around. I think that you can sometimes ride faster. So again, Giant did a great job. And I will also say, while I'm mentioning that, is that this bike, even though it has that Belgian style geometry, it's still a great bike for riding dirt roads, mainly because of that comfort. And what also makes it a great dirt road bike is the amount of tire clearance. So you can see you've got tons of tire clearance. These tires are the stock ones, and I believe these are a 33C tire. And so you can probably run up to a 40C tire on this bike, and you've got even more clearance on the front. So not only is this bike a great cyclocross race bike, it can also be a great dirt road bike. Now, the reason that I have a gravel grinder is because I also want a bike that's set up for gravel grinding with the wheels and seat pack and mirror and all that, and 2 water bottle cages, so that in the middle of cross season I don't have to make those changes when I want to go out on a Monday morning after racing cross the previous day. And so that's really the main reason I have 2 bikes, because this one, for the roads that I ride, makes a great dirt road bike. And the gearing, let me talk about the gearing, because if you ride dirt roads and stuff up in the mountains, you may not have enough gearing for this. So this is a 1x11, and it's got it goes up to about I think it's a 32. Let me check this. Okay, so I had to check the specs. So this is an 1128 cassette, and it's got a 40 front chainring. For most cyclocross courses, this is going to be great. It does make the bike a little bit less versatile if you're wanting to also use it for dirt roads, if you live in an area that's got a lot of steep, long climbs. Now, I live in an area where we don't have long climbs, and so this gearing is fine. What I've noticed is my low gear, I can be going about 4 or 5 miles an hour, and the high gear, I can get up to about 27, 28. Beyond that, I start to go above my normal cadence, which is around 80 to 90 RPM. So, you know, for a sprint on a downhill or just really trying to crank it up on a downhill, you're probably going to run out of gear. So what you could do is you could just get a bigger or smaller front chainring or a little bit bigger cassette in the back. Now you got to be careful because this is a kind of a short to medium cage derailleur, and so you couldn't go too big on the cassette because you're going to have a little bit too much stretch in the derailleur, but you can definitely go bigger on this. And you see I've got it in the second to largest cog, and you know the cage isn't that stretched. So you know, I say all that to just say that this bike, again, it can be a good dirt road bike. You just got to be careful with your gearing. Decide if you need more gearing and if you could adjust this bike to do so. And I will actually mention one more thing about dirt road riding. If you are going to do a lot of dirt road riding and you need a bike that's more versatile, the Advanced Pro 2 is the model down from this. It's probably the one that I would recommend for that. It's got 105 components, still has hydraulic disc brakes. However, the wheels are not tubeless ready, so you're going to have to take that into consideration. So while I'm mentioning the wheels, let's go ahead and talk about these because I am really impressed actually with these wheels. When I first set this bike up, I did not use the stock tires. So the stock tires are the Maxxis Mud Wrestlers. I put on a tire that was not a tubeless ready tire, and I got it to seat. It took a little bit of effort, just some shaking around, a couple days of airing up the tire after it kind of went flat overnight, and then it held fine. So the rims, I mentioned this in one of my other videos, these come ready to go tubeless. It's already got the tape on. It comes with really nice valve stems, and so you're ready to go tubeless. Now, I now recommend going with tubeless ready tires. I've had some issues in the past and I made some videos on that. But the tubeless ready, when I put these on, again, let me get this tire up here so you can see it. When I put these tubeless ready Maxxis tires on, they aired up perfectly and did not lose any air at all. And you just kind of have the confidence of that extra layer of rubber inside. And the tires are a little bit stiffer on the sidewall, so again, I recommend going tubeless ready, and this bike comes with tubeless ready tires, so you are ready to go out of the box. And that's the beauty of this bike, is this is a bike you pull out of the box and you hit the highest level of cyclocross racing and you're going to do great. There's not a lot of bikes out there that I can say that about. Sometimes there's modifications that you got to make, but you know, to get it to your preference. But for my preferences, this bike is absolutely ready to go right out of the box. So you know, the wheels seem to be pretty stiff to me. They're an alloy wheel, but they have good stiffness. I don't really notice a whole bunch of flex. Sometimes with wheels you don't know the flex you're getting until you go up to like a carbon. I found that on my mountain bike, but for this cross bike, the wheels are really holding up well for me, and I'm really enjoying them. Of course, this is a Shimano Di2 electronic shifting bike, and by the way, this does come with the left shifter is ready to go Di2. So if you ever wanted to put a front derailleur on this, you could. You would just basically buy a Shimano Di2 front derailleur and then get a different crankset so you could have two chain rings. So you can easily convert this. It's going to take a little bit of investment in a crankset and a derailleur, but you could convert this to a 2x11 drivetrain. So that's another option if you wanted to get this bike for dirt road riding and make it a little bit more versatile. The Di2 on this bike has worked flawlessly. If you've seen some of my other videos, my first bike was a 9er BSB9 RDO, first Di2 bike I should say, and I love the bike, but the battery went bad, and it put a bad taste in my mouth for Di2. Because I got such a great deal on this bike, I decided to give Di2 one more shot, but so far it's been great. No issues at all with the battery. I may do one more like really long-term report on this bike if I hold on to it and follow up with the Di2, but so far I'm really glad I'm back on Di2. And I can say that for cyclocross, Di2 is a really great application. It's probably one of the best applications for Di2 because you are shifting a lot and you can go through a lot of mud. If you do a gravel grinder event or a cyclocross race that's covered in mud, and you just get your rear derailleur caked in mud, and it's mechanical, it can just completely stop shifting. I've had guys tell me that they've had that issue. With Di2, because you've got a motor kind of pushing the derailleur, it's going to push through that mud and junk and actually keep shifting. So also, because it's just wires, there's no cables to get mud inside, you know, it's going to also keep shifting because it's just sending a signal down to the derailleur. So again, Di2 is a really good thing for cyclocross racing and for gravel grinders because of the mud. Cyclocross racing, you're shifting a lot more than a typical gravel rider event, but you know, the mud clearance is still an issue with gravel grinding. So the only complaint I have with the hydraulic Di2 is the lever comes in really far. And what's interesting is I have hydraulic Ultegra levers on my gravel grinder, but it's mechanical shifting, not electronic, and the levers don't come in near as far. So when they actually grab, it's sooner. So on the gravel grinder, it's probably more about right here. The problem is you can get your, if you put your finger down here, you're not going to get the lever all the way in, so you got to keep your finger up. You get used to it. It's not that big of a deal, but when I switch back and forth, I'm surprised at how far these Di2 levers come in. It's not a bleed issue. I've had other guys tell me this, and this is my second bike with Di2 and hydraulic brakes, and I had the same issue on the other bike. It's a matter of where they grab, and once they do grab, they're firm, but they just come in really far. Now you can adjust the levers so they come out more, but they get a little bit too far away from the bar for my hands. I don't have very big hands, so I don't like making that adjustment. So it's something that you get used to. It's not that big of a deal, but it's definitely something you need to think about. The only other minor complaint I have on this bike, and it's very minor, is Giant did not include plugs, at least on this one, to plug up these holes. So if you saw my last video that I did on this, these holes were open. I ended up getting some plugs at the bike shop, which worked very well. So I plugged up this hole and then put something that's going to keep water out where the Di2 wire goes in. And so actually, I think, okay, it did come with the brake one, but it did not come with the one for the wire. So I had to get this from the bike shop. The brake one did come with it. I actually found that in the package after I had gotten the bike rolling for a month or so. It did come also with the one that where the wire comes out the back. But again, these two holes, you can get water down inside the frame when you're washing the bike or when you're riding through rain. The other issue I had with kind of similar is it's very open, and I don't know if you can see that, but I actually had to put some tape. In fact, let me flip the bike over so I can show you real good. So it's probably time for me to replace this tape, but it's kind of open here, and when I had this bike going for about a little over a month, in fact, it was right after I shot my last video, I said that I had no creaking in the bottom bracket after I tightened the chainring. The chainring bolts were loose and I had to get those tight because it was creaking, and it took me a while to find it. Literally the day after I shot that last video, my bottom bracket started creaking. And so I pulled it out, cleaned it up, put a little bit of grease inside the bottom bracket. But I also taped up this kind of open area where you can get some water and mud and junk inside. And I did have quite a bit of debris, you know, particles inside the bottom bracket. Once I cleaned those out, it's been fine. And I'm going on about 3 months now after I made that last video. So, you know, I would recommend doing something like this tape to cover up the open area so you don't get water inside the bottom. And so there's no sleeve though, like some of the Shimano ones have. And so, you know, something you got to pay attention to. And if it starts creaking, you got to pull the cranks off, get the bottom bracket bearings out, grease them up and put them back in. But like I said, since I've done that, it's been pretty much noise free. I'll get a creak every once in a while, but it's not continuous. So I did remedy that. Just a few other things I want to mention on the components. The handlebars are nice. It's an alloy bar, but they've got a really nice bend to them. A comfortable bar. It's got a 90mm stem, which is a good length for a cyclocross race bike. Stretches you out a little bit, but still is not too long. and allows for a sharper handling bike. Now, I did say on my first video, or my last video, that the seat post was aluminum. It's actually not, and somebody had mentioned that, so I stand corrected. This is actually a composite seat post. It's kind of hard to tell that it's composite, and I'm sure the head is aluminum, but it is composite. It doesn't flex a whole lot. Some seat posts are built up with a carbon that allows them to flex, like the Niner RDO seat post. This one does not have a lot of flex to it. I'm sure it has a little bit of give since it is carbon, but it works well. Like I mentioned in one of my videos, you do need to make sure you get the torque specs right on this little wedge that holds the seat post in, because if you go too little, it can slip. And I had that. Fortunately, I was just practicing, and I did a remount, and the seat post slipped inside. So use a torque wrench, put it right at the 6 Newton meters that Giant recommends, and you're good to go. The saddle is comfortable. I had a Physique saddle on my very first Giant cyclocross alloy bike it was uncomfortable. In fact, I did a ride, about a 60-mile ride, in the last 5 miles. I think I stood up because it hit some pressure points. This one is actually very comfortable. So I guess you would say this Antares, Physique Antares, but it's a good saddle. I've used it on longer rides, and no comfort issues. I do wish it had kind of the anatomical cutout. But other than that, it gets the pressure points really nice for me, and it's also a saddle that's easy to remount on. It's not too long, so dismounting and remounting is not really an issue in a cyclocross race. I didn't mention this before when I was talking about the gearing and the drivetrain, but it comes, obviously you can see, with a chain guide, which, as I mentioned in one of my other videos, I'm glad they did that. It does have a narrow ride chain ring. And so you could probably get away without using the chain guide, but I have dropped a chain on my mountain bike a couple times with the narrow ride, and it's nice to have that security of having a chain guide, because if you drop a chain in a cyclocross race, it could cost you some positions, and so it'd really suck to drive a long way for a race, get all ready, and drop a chain and just because you didn't have a chain guide. So it's really cool Giant included that. A few other component things. This does come with a 142 by 12 through axle in the rear, and it comes with a through axle in the front too, so a lot of good stiffness. I won't show the axles. I did show that in I think my first video that I did on this bike. So really cool that Giant has just totally modernized this bike, even with the through axles in the front and the rear. One last component I want to mention is the brake rotors. They do come with a 140 rotor. I have used 160 on a cyclocross race bike and 140. I think for cyclocross racing, 140 is the way to go because it makes for a lighter bike, less rotational weight, so a bike that's going to accelerate quicker. But what it also does is it doesn't give you too much braking power. Because cyclocross races are run on dirt and grass, a lot of times it's wet, and if you have too much braking power, you can lock up the wheels. Now for gravel grinders, I think 160 is the way to go. You need that extra power because the speeds are typically higher when you're descending a mountain dirt road. But for cyclocross racing, the advantage of a 160 for cross racing is it takes a little bit less effort, so when your hands are getting tired at the end of a race. So I could go either way, but my preference would be the 140, so I'm glad Giant included those on this bike. So to conclude my review on the Giant TCX Advanced Pro 1, this is a bike, like I said earlier, that you can pull out of the box and hit a cyclocross course. Whether you're getting into the sport and you want a bike that you're not going to have to worry about upgrading later on down the road, or you have more experience and you just want a bike that's going to be able to take you as fast as your legs can go on a cyclocross course, this is the bike to do it. I can say that on this bike I have had absolutely zero mechanical issues. I've done about 12 races this past cyclocross season. I've had some very good results. I've hit all of my goals, and so this is a bike that has just performed flawlessly for me. No misshifts, no drop chains, no flats, nothing coming loose on the bike. It's just been a bike that has mechanically been perfectly sound. So this is one that I can recommend for obviously cyclocross racing, and like I went into detail earlier, also for dirt road riding. So depending on what you're looking for in a gravel bike. This bike, because of the comfort of the carbon, can be that too. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Thanks for watching.